Welcome back to the channel. Thank you for spending some time with me tonight. And let's talk about the creeks on your lake, because this is one of those deals where it fishes completely different than the main lake. And there's times of the year where you really have to be in a creek if you want to do well. So right now, in the colder months, the pre-spawn, the creeks will play because typically the water is going to be a little bit warmer in the creeks than it is on the main lake. When, 3 or 4 degrees makes all the difference in the world, the creeks may be your only place where you can go and catch a bass. So right now, we're kind of dealing with that. We're going to have a couple more cold fronts come through this year, and the main river can just get kind of weird. The main lake can just be tough, and the creeks, the fishing is significantly better. So I kind of want to explain the difference between what happens in creeks compared to the main lake. So whenever you're finding fish on the main lake, that's pretty close to probably where those fish live. They're going to venture around, but they're going to feed on similar type spots. If it's a big point, maybe it's some type of current break. But on the main lake or the main river, fish are going to tend to use the same type of stuff. Now, in the creeks, you don't really have that same luxury. Fish are going to constantly be moving all around. So why this is important is if you find some fish in practice, maybe it's on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday before the tournament on Saturday, you're not going to be able to typically go back and catch those fish off the same spots. So like for me, when I'm looking for a creek, I'm going to go in there, I'm going to try to find some good looking water. And if I get bit, then I have an idea that this is a creek that I could go and catch some fish in. But I'm not going to go back in the tournament and try to catch them off those same spots. Now, obviously, if you find a really good spot, fish might constantly be using that spot to feed, but that's not always going to be a spot where there's going to be fish. And like wherever you do get bit, that doesn't always mean that those are going to be places where consistently you'll get bites. What it does mean is that there are some fish in there, they are biting, and you just need to kind of cover the whole thing, fish lots of different places to really get a good feel. So that's one of those deals where it's really hard to go back and catch the fish you were catching few days earlier when you're in a creek. Now, the other things that I think are really important when it comes to creek fishing is the extreme backs of creeks are typically good if you don't have a whole lot of water fluctuation on your lake. So like Guntersville, for instance, we only have about 1.5 to 2 feet of fluctuation throughout the year. So those fish are pretty used to swimming to the backs of the creeks. Now, I've fished other lakes like Dale Hollow where they'll bring it up 10 feet at a time. Those fish aren't going to go from the main lake and swim all the way back to where was, what was dry land a few weeks earlier. They'll pick a spot and then they'll stop there and they won't continue to venture further back. So you got to kind of understand on your lake, is there a big drawdown? Does the water come way up? On those lakes, those fish aren't going to go to the extreme backs. On lakes where there's not a lot of fluctuation, they will be all the way in the extreme backs. And on those lakes where there isn't a lot of fluctuation, the extreme backs of creeks typically are pretty good. Any of those dead ends are where a lot of fish are going to live. Great spawning habitat, but also a great place for ambushing shad or whatever it may be that's getting pushed back there, and it's just going to usually house a lot of fish. But the double-edged sword with the backs of the creeks is that a lot of times if you have a big rain, none of that will be good. That will all muddy up and you won't be able to catch anything back there for the most part. Most lakes, maybe lakes that stay dirty, you can go back there and catch them in the dirty water, but lakes that are typically a little clearer, it's going to be really hard to catch those fish because those fish are just going to follow that clear water and just swim out. But the creeks can be really good and they can be really predictable. You're not necessarily going to know where exactly to go and fish and catch them, but you will see, like when the water's low, it'll pull some fish out, and when the water gets high, it'll push them back. So it's an easier place to figure out. And then this time of year when the water's warmer, the creeks may be your best bet, or at least a great consistent place to start your practice, or if you're just having a fun day of fishing. Creeks can be really fun. So one more thing extremely important about creeks: you're not going to have the biggest schools of fish where it's just 4-pounder, 5-pounder, 4-pounder like you will typically find out on the main lake. But what you will find in the creeks is, since those fish are residents, they don't really ever leave, the biggest fish on your lake will live in those creeks. I mean, you will see big, giant resident fish that are significantly bigger than those schooling fish that live out on the main lake. So that's another one of those deals where, yeah, on average, you're not going to catch the size that you catch out on the main lake, but one big bite can typically come out of a creek that you wouldn't catch on the main lake. So that's creek fishing. You got to fish the whole thing sometimes. You never know where they're going to be. They move around a lot, but it can be a really big deal, especially in these colder months. So try creeks, guys. Good luck to you, and I'll see you on the water.